Okay, so this is going to be the first tutorial for Unit 3 of Paper 2. We're looking here at global resource consumption and security. In terms of the syllabus link, well, we're interested in global and regional continental progress towards poverty reduction, including the growth of the new global middle class. I'm going to go a little bit beyond that idea of the growth of the new global middle class. That is the most important aspect here, but we'll look at something a little bit different to that as well. So firstly, we see a bit of a mixed picture here in terms of 1977 to 2017. You can see actually for most regions of the world, there has been significant falls in poverty reduction. So for example, if we just look at India here, we've got kind of 50% poverty rates, and that's fallen between 30 and 40% here. Massive reductions in China, as you can see. So real success there. And of course, in South America too, we're seeing significant changes. If we look at sub-Saharan Africa, in particular, we might focus on the variation with sub-Saharan Africa. Try to avoid overgeneralizing this region. Sometimes we seem to group all these nations almost as one. And if you look at Western Africa, for example, you've seen significant falls in poverty rates. So right across West Africa, we've got big changes there and improvements. The picture in East Africa is less evident. This is the DRC, and look, we had no data in 1977, and now we can see we've got extremely high levels of poverty. But some countries having some success and some countries having less success there. If we take a look at the general picture, these composite line graphs are really kind of cool, but quite difficult to read. So you can see here the total number of people in poverty has fallen dramatically. You can see it's now well below 1 billion. It's too often a stereotype that these poverty levels are higher. But then actually when we think about, well, which region has led to that fall, it's this area in red. Look, East Asia and Pacific. This is predominantly China's success. Look at the massive poverty levels back in 1990, and then real reduction, massive reduction over time. We see small reductions here in Latin America and the Caribbean. Poverty levels were not particularly high anyway. And we see a fall here in South Asia, okay, maybe 50% or a fall of 100% rather. It's halved in size. And in blue, sub-Saharan Africa, look, actually seeing an increase in poverty levels. So that mixed picture up here from 1977 to 2017, okay, where we've seen some success in some countries and less success, might be kind of influenced here by the data coming available into DRC. So rising levels of poverty over time visible. Now, if we start to think about the changing patterns of middle class, the thing that you really need to know is that the middle class, the global middle class, is rising. And the data sort of suggests it will increase from 1.8 billion in 2009 to 3.2 billion by 2020 and 4.9 billion by 2030. And the vast majority of this growth is coming out of Asia. So by 2030, Asia will represent 66% of the global middle class population and 59% of middle class consumption compared to 28% and 23% back in 2009. Although we have to put a little warning here, middle class in these regions is not the same perhaps as middle class in developed countries, such as those in Europe. There remains a large amount of informal work in these areas. There still remains quite low income and job vulnerability, and a lack of government services and government subsidy or payments, social security payments, keeps this group quite vulnerable. So the thing you need to know is that, yeah, middle classes are rising as a group globally. This is a good thing. In HICs, we see a slightly different picture, though. We see a sort of squeeze of the middle income group. And the data here suggests, if we take a look at the right here, we look at the US, 1971, you can see that the group here in orange, the middle income groups, was the predominantly larger group. But now in 2015, it's about on par with the upper classes and lower classes or lower income groups. So we see this kind of reduction in size, we see a growth, of course, it's a growth, but actually as a percentage of the population, more people have fallen out of that income group. And look at the growth of the lower income groups in the US. So, good story in terms of reductions in poverty, massive growth of middle income groups globally, but within HICs, we see this kind of squeeze of middle income groups.